Yates says Comey had the FBI ambush Michael Flynn in the White House, quote, unilaterally, was unaware Steele subsource had folded on Trump-Russia allegations in January of 2017. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates. She was testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee on August 5th. And she has some bombshells. She basically threw former FBI Director James Comey under the bus. She says that he was the one, it was his idea to go have FBI agents go to the White House and interview former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn on basically false grounds, that he was a Russian agent, to kind of lull him into a sense of comfort, that this wasn't some sort of questioning. It was just some, random security check or something from the FBI, and had nothing to do with their crossfire hurricane investigation into President Donald Trump, which turns out, top secret, had been carried over from the Obama administration into the Trump administration. And James Comey, he didn't even go to the Justice Department with the acting attorney general to let her know that he was going to go and ambush Michael Flynn and have this secret interview, and then to use that as a basis for a criminal investigation into Michael Flynn and probably President Donald Trump as well. And so it was very deceptive. And the fact is, James Comey, he went rogue. And that's according to Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, who was leading this hearing with questioning of Sally Yates. He asks Sally Yates, did Comey go rogue? And she says, well, yeah, you could kind of put it that way. So let's take a listen to what Sally Yates had to say in questioning from Lindsey Graham.
Here's what I want to understand. It's a counterintelligence investigation that led to the interview. You didn't authorize the interview. As a matter of fact, you wanted to go to the White House and tell them about the problem, didn't you?
That's right. I did. I thought that was the more immediate issue.
And when you heard about the interview, you got upset, didn't you?
I was upset that Director Comey didn't coordinate that with us and acted unilaterally. Yes, I was.
Okay. Did Comey go rogue?
But you could use that term, yes.
Fine.
But the rogue is to the
wait a minute. Thank you. So here's the point I'm trying to make. Did I violate the Logan Act when I called the Israelis up and suggested that you need to come out against the Iranian nuclear deal because I think it's bad for the United States and Israel, even though that was the policy of the Obama administration?
If you were doing that as a representative of the government, while the Obama administration was in
I'm
place.
not part of the Obama administration.
No, I understand that, but I think the Logan Act is a reflection of our country's longstanding policy.
My question is, would a United States senator, in your view, violate the Logan Act if they reached out to a foreign government to express a contrary view of foreign policy?
If you were negotiating on behalf of the U.S. government, you may. But, Senator, I have to tell you, the whole prism here that you have, that this is all about the Logan Act, is just not how we were.
Why did somebody bring it up? Why did they mention the Logan Act if it's not about the Logan Act?
Because, as I was trying to say just a minute ago, that's a reflection of our long-standing policy in the United States, that you have one president at a time. And this wasn't just...
Is it the long-standing policy of the United States that an incoming administration can't talk to foreign leaders about changing policy?
You can certainly talk to foreign leaders about a potential change in policy in the future, but this wasn't any policy. This was undercutting the sanctions of the U.S. government.
You had one administration leaving in 2 weeks, and you had a new administration coming in urging them, don't escalate. And to anybody who thinks that's a violation of the Logan Act, that is stunning as hell.
So that's Lindsey Graham. He was on fire and going at Yates here. But clearly, she didn't know that Michael Flynn was even going to be interviewed at the White House by FBI agents at James Comey's direction. And this is a pretty stunning admission from Yates. Comey kept the then acting Attorney General Sally Yates in the dark about something that by all accounts was a serious breach of protocol, an attempt to entrap the president's top foreign policy advisor to take out President Donald Trump, the duly elected president. The agents questioned Flynn on what turns out were basically routine discussions and an attempt to prevent escalation of U.S.-Russian relations after the Obama administration had just enacted sanctions. They were kicking diplomats out of the country. And what Flynn was telling Kislyak, and we noticed from the transcripts now, which have been released, was basically, we're kicking out some of your diplomats. Don't escalate. Don't do the same thing. And we'll deal with these issues when President Trump gets into power. And what Sally Yates is saying here is, you can't do that. You can't have a change of policy. Right after she says you can have a change of policy. And I think Michael Flynn was being a patriot. He was trying to prevent a dangerous escalation between the two top nuclear powers in the world, the United States and Russia, that have thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at one another. And I think that this is a long-standing belief that he's held. It was a policy President Trump adopted on the campaign trail in 2016, and there's really nothing controversial about it, and it stands in a long line of presidents, frankly, that have engaged in détente, dating back to Richard Nixon, frankly. Nixon, Carter, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, all to some extent were engaged in de-escalation of nuclear tensions with Russia, first with the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty that came out of the 1970s, and then President Reagan, he went in for the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty with Gorbachev, and then started negotiating the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which was completed under George Herbert Walker Bush and Gorbachev, and I believe was one of the chief reasons we ended the Cold War the way that we did. And so Flynn wasn't doing anything that wasn't already long-standing U.S. policy. And unfortunately, what happened with the Obama administration on the way out may have severely damaged those relations going forward, and perhaps irreparably. It's pretty sad that President Trump wasn't allowed to pursue that policy. And there was nothing, treasonous about it when Flynn's telling Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, on the phone during the presidential transition, after President Trump has already won the election, hey, we know you're worried about these sanctions, but don't escalate. That could have, maybe that prevented a conflict. Who knows what world we would live in if Flynn's not making that phone call. And so I think that he was doing his job, and he was preparing U.S.-Russian relations so that you can hit the ground running. And he would have had contacts with dozens of other foreign leaders and ambassadors during that time frame. So I don't really see what was so important about sending these FBI agents to the White House to interrogate President Trump's top advisor in Michael Flynn about that, when Sally Yates was saying we should just, advise President Trump and the National Security Council and Michael Flynn about what was going on with these phone calls, and then let those concerns be stated. I think that that's not really that controversial, and certainly no reason to go and launch a criminal investigation of the president and the National Security Advisor. And then to keep the acting attorney general in the dark about it all is just beyond belief. Yates was also apparently in the dark about the FBI's separate January 24, 2017 interview of the primary subsource used by former British spy Christopher Steele to investigate. He wrote the dossier that was used by the FBI to get the FISA warrants that were utilized against Carter Page, former Trump campaign advisor. And the FBI interviewed Steele's top subsource in 2017 in January, 4 days after President Trump was inaugurated. And basically it debunked what Steele had said. The source was contradicting what Steele said, according to the Inspector General report from Michael Horowitz. And they went in and the FBI identifies and interviews the primary subsource in early 2017. Quote, the primary subsource made statements during his or her January 2017 FBI interview that were inconsistent with multiple sections of the Steele reports, including some that were relied upon in the FISA applications. Among other things, regarding the allegations attributed to Person 1, the primary subsource's account of these communications, if true, was not consistent with and in fact contradicted the allegations of a, quote, well-developed conspiracy. That was from the Steele dossier. But Yates, she says she doesn't learn about that until the Horowitz report comes out years later. and these inconsistencies, which were put before the FISA court. She says she would have never signed the FISA warrant if that had been the case. But unfortunately, they were signed, and this investigation was launched. Now, the subsource interview actually happened days before Sally Yates was fired by President Trump on January 30, 2017. And she had signed the FISA warrants in October 21, 2016, and January 12, 2017. And we know that from the Inspector General report. There were 4 FISA applications in total. Again, October 21, 2016, January 12, 2017, April 7, 2017, and June 29, 2017. By then, Yates was already gone, but the damage was already done because President Trump had fired James Comey. This prompted the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller after former Attorney General Jeff Sessions had recused himself. So therefore, as one of the top Justice Department officials who signed the FISA warrant, she was responsible more than anybody for spying on the Trump campaign. And unfortunately, in questioning from Senator Mike Lee, she didn't even know that the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign had paid for the dossier that the FBI ended up utilizing. Let's take a listen to that.
Were you aware that agents were using information compiled by Christopher Steele at the request of the DNC at the time you signed either the initial Carter Page FISA application or the first renewal?
I was not aware that the DNC was funding it, but I think we suspected that there was a chance, but we did not know that to be a fact.
Now, that part of it is pretty unbelievable that the Justice Department didn't even care where Steele had gotten the information, because they signed the FISA warrant on October 21, 2016, renew it again on January 12, 2017, and they don't even bother to interview the subsource until January 24, 2017, after President Trump has already been inaugurated. And so that's a pretty egregious omission from the FISA courts, because they didn't have any idea that this information could have been kind of screwy. She told Graham that had she known what she knows now, she wouldn't have signed the FISA warrant applications. Quote, "If I had known that it contained incorrect information, I certainly wouldn't have signed it." She said, "I believe the Department of Justice and the FBI have a duty of candor with the FISA court that was not met. And I know now, based on the Horowitz report, what she says she was, quote, certainly shocked by." Now, both of these January 24th interviews by the FBI of Flynn and Steele's primary subsource were of critical importance, but the acting attorney general at the time didn't know about either of them prior to them taking place. And the FBI under Comey was carrying, therefore, a top secret investigation of the White House that Yates wasn't aware of, because she didn't authorize the interrogation of Michael Flynn. And then when the FBI turned up exculpatory evidence, calling the whole enterprise into question, the acting attorney general was not briefed, because she says she didn't find about these inconsistencies until the Horowitz report was published in December of 2019. And finally, the exculpatory evidence was hidden from the FISA court as the department went on to request 2 more FISA renewals. So they knew on January 24th, 2017, that the Steele dossier was potentially extremely problematic, that they didn't have any real witnesses from the primary subsource who couldn't testify to much of what was in the Steele dossier, including the accusation that Trump and the campaign helped Russia hack the DNC and put the emails onto WikiLeaks. He says he never mentioned WikiLeaks. And then finally, James Comey says he wasn't even aware of the subsource interview when it took place, and he kind of discounts what the subsource was saying and saying, oh, well, we can still carry on the investigation even if we don't have any witnesses. This is what Fox News Sunday's Chris Wallace. Let's take a listen to that.
Then there's the issue of how reliable the Steele dossier, in fact, was. On January 6, 2017, in the Trump Tower, you brief Donald Trump, president-elect, about the Steele dossier. That same month, the FBI talks to Steele's main Russian contact, the main person on whom he based the dossier, who says, according to the IG report, quote, "Steele misstated or exaggerated the primary subsource's statements in multiple sections of the reporting." Director Comey, not only do you fail to go back to the president-elect or president after January 20th and tell him, oh, you know that report I briefed you on? Turns out it's bunk. But the FBI goes back and renews its FISA application 3 more times. And by this point, the FBI knows that the Steele reporting is not credible.
Yeah, I think you're mischaracterizing both what the FBI knew and what Mr. Horowitz says in his report. They didn't conclude the reporting from Steele was bunk. They concluded there were significant questions about the reliability of some of the subsource reporting. That should have been included in the renewals. But when I briefed the president, I briefed him on a small part of it that I told him I didn't know whether it was true or not. I didn't care. I just needed him to know about it.
I think you're mischaracterizing. Steele isn't, or rather, Horowitz isn't saying that the subsource, the Russian contact, was unreliable or was inaccurate. The Russian contact said to the FBI, Steele is unreliable because he misrepresented. Steele misstated or exaggerated the source's statements in multiple sections of the report. He's saying, I told him one thing and he wrote something else. The FBI knew that.
Yeah, but that doesn't drive a conclusion that Steele's reporting is bunk. I mean, there's a number of tricky things to that. First, you're interviewing the subsource after all the reporting has become public. And so as a counterintelligence investigator, you have to think, is he walking away from it because it's now public? Well, and that has to go into your assessment of Mr. Steele.
It hadn't, I mean, if it had become public just barely, this is in January of 2017. This isn't 2 years later.
Right, this is when it blew up, when it was published by whatever the outfit is, BuzzFeed. It was all over the news and had become a big deal. And so
Did you know all of this?
All of what?
Everything that we're talking about here. Did you know that, in fact, the Steele report was the key for probable cause? Did you know that the FBI had talked to the Russian contact and he said what Steele said he had told him was not true? Did you know this? You're the FBI director.
First, again, the report will speak for itself. I don't believe the FBI concluded that Steele's reporting was bunk after talking to a subsource. But no, I didn't. As the director, you're not kept informed on the details of an investigation. So no, in general, I didn't know what they'd learned from the subsource. I didn't know the particulars of the investigation.
But this isn't some investigation, sir. This is an investigation of the campaign of the man who is the president of the United States. You've just been through a firestorm investigating Hillary Clinton. I would think if I were in your position, I would have been on that, like a junkyard dog. I would have wanted to know everything they were doing in investigating the Trump campaign.
And Chris Wallace is absolutely right. He should have been on that like a junkyard dog. But apparently, according to what we've been told, FBI Director James Comey, he doesn't know about the subsource interview. He's not briefed on it. He doesn't bring it to the Attorney General's attention. He doesn't bring it to Rod Rosenstein's attention either, the Deputy Attorney General. And neither was it brought to Sally Yates's attention. So you had the FBI agents who conducted the subsource interview who were apparently not briefing anybody on it, despite the fact that their case had fallen apart. So as unbelievable as it appears, both Yates and Comey are telling the truth. If they are, then neither of them knew that the Justice Department's case had fallen apart just 4 days after President Trump had been inaugurated, and neither did the FISA court. And again, Wallace is absolutely right. They weren't investigating gang members or the mob. They were investigating the president of the United States. And so the agents under Comey's command, they had gone rogue as well and were covering up vital information, as unbelievable as that sounds. And so I have to say, probable cause under the Fourth Amendment, that's a joke. Nobody who's overseeing the FISA system is reviewing any of the essential facts in the most important cases. Probably the most important case in the history of FISA was to investigate President Trump and his campaign, and they didn't even verify the facts. They didn't even interview the subsources. They didn't even care that the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign had paid for this basically junk intelligence and managed to get it into our national security apparatus and then create a full-fledged criminal investigation, launch a special counsel, and basically cancel President Trump's first term in office. This is an unbelievable abuse of power. The peaceful transfer of power was undermined completely from the Obama administration, which carried over this top-secret investigation into the Trump administration and didn't bother to tell anyone, and they didn't even have any good sources or any probable cause to do it in the first place. At least if Yates and Comey had known about the exculpatory information, but simply declined out of corruption to tell the FISA court, then you have a real problem you can deal with. Oh, they lied to the court, then you can charge people. But in this case, the overseers themselves were unaware of key details of the case of investigating the president of the United States. It's the system itself that's broke. And so the FISA Act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that should be just simply abolished. It's supposed to assist the president of the United United States in gathering intelligence. Instead, it was used against the president in a coup to overthrow him and put somebody else in power, because they were upset that Hillary Clinton had lost the election. That's not what the Justice Department's supposed to be up to. That's not what the FBI is supposed to be up to. And I'll leave you with the close here. If it offers no protection, FISA, not even to the president, from rogue agents motivated by politics or power in their attempt to overturn the outcome of the 2016 election with false allegations of treason and to subvert the will of the American people, then the apple has fallen very far from the tree of liberty, and it is rotten to the core. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.